Hello, welcome back to Texas Cooking. Today I wanted to get into knife sharpening, the kinds of materials used in knives, and how to keep them sharp, different methods, different kinds of sharpening equipment, and what to look for. Okay, so this is just going to be sort of an overall on knives and sharpening and that kind of thing. Now, first I want to start with the stones. I have out here two different kinds of stones. Two natural stones, and these are two diamond stones. These are a sheet of metal that has been impregnated with small diamond chips. This one is coarse and this one is fine. The company that makes these two different stones, and I'll say this, these are really wonderful. I started using these several years back, and I can say from just using it that these will cut 2 to 3 times faster than a natural stone. So you'll spend a little more time on a natural stone sharpening. Now, I have done so much sharpening on these old stones that they have gotten worn down. They're thicker on the ends than they are in the middle, so they've got sort of a natural swoop to them. That will not occur on these stones, though, although these do over time wear out, and you'll need to replace them the same way these do. The last stone I have down here is called a black stone. This is used to be used by surgeons to sharpen scalpels. Now, I believe all scalpels these days are packaged replacement scalpels, so they don't necessarily use these stones much anymore. What I have this for, and what I like to use it for, is after I make a knife really sharp on this, if I want to polish the edge to make it look really nice for presentation or something like that, then I can polish up the edge on this. It will make it even sharper. And different steels will sharpen easier than other steels. Some steels will get sharper than other steels. And it just depends on what kind of knife you have. And we'll get into that in just a moment. One last method of sharpening would be the hone steel. Now, this is used by dragging the knife down across it. And the problem with this is these have a tendency to nick the blade a little bit. So if you have blades, especially hardened steel blades that would be like the heavy stainless blades, usually a little more expensive, these will nick them up really bad. So be careful using a hone steel, and you might want to use it sparingly, where the flat stones will give you a better cut on the edge of your knife. This will only give you a minor touch-up that in the long run will do more damage and make sharpening a lot more difficult. I would just say avoid using the hone steel altogether. On these natural stones, I don't use these anymore, except for this occasionally, and the only time I use the coarse on the diamond stone is when I need to sharpen up a knife that is extremely dull. Sometimes a friend will bring me their knives for sharpening, or to start it, or to teach them how to sharpen, and I'll break this out because they'll usually have very dull knives, and we can restore the bevel to a knife using a stone like this. I restore the edge with this, and I restore the bevel with that. Now, if you're wondering what is the bevel, well, I've got several knives out, and we'll be able to show bevel a little bit clearer later as I start sharpening. But the bevel is the actual sharpened edge, just that finite little edge that you have after it is sharpened, and it becomes really apparent because the steel will be bright and shiny after you sharpen it. So, different steels, let's get into that for a moment before we start sharpening. Different steels sharpen in different ways. Now, some steels will rust easy while others do not rust at all. Your stainless steels, your forged steels generally don't ever rust. They do, some companies like Ontario Knife Company, the Chicago Knife Company, they make knives of high carbon steel. This is one of the, from the former, the Ontario Knife Company. These knives will get unbelievably sharp because of the high carbon content in that steel. Allows them to just hold an unbelievable edge. And I like that in a paring knife. I like it to the ability to get it wickedly sharp, but something that doesn't cost a lot, I don't mind injuring or replacing. Other steels, some are going to be forged. Those will usually be a little bit thicker. They'll have a hardened blade that is very difficult to flex. Sometimes they won't bend at all. And you'll want in any knife, whether it be a high carbon steel or stainless steel, is to make sure it's just a good quality knife. Don't be cheap on your knives. Go ahead and spend good money for them, but you don't have to go crazy. You don't have to buy the most expensive thing out there to get good quality knives. You can get, for about a mid-range price, you can get top-of-the-line stuff. Some stainless is extremely hard, and the process they use in tempering it makes them very, very hard. That has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage is it holds an edge for a long time. Disadvantage will be very slow to sharpen, even though it is slow to dull. It takes a long time to get it sharp again because the steel is so hard, and it's hard for the stones to grind away what you need. And one last steel I would mention is what's called a Damascus steel, and this is just a steel that is folded and hammered, and it can be done through an automated process, which I think this type of knife is done through. This is a Japanese shun knife, and they're generally very thin on the blade. Okay, that makes them somewhat flexible. You can bend that knife. Okay, the blade on this is somewhat brittle also, in that edge has a special forge on it that allows it to hold an edge wonderful, and it will get sharper than most any other knife. So the Japanese knives can be sharpened to incredible degrees. Now let's get into the technique on the sharpening itself. Also, I wanted to mention, when you're looking at knife shape and you're going to purchase your knives, you might want to consider, do you want something that's very pointed, do you want something that's rounded, and what are the benefits both ways? Well, if you're catching the bottom edge of a pan and trying to cut from a loaf pan or something like that's nice, because it kind of fits down on those curves and across the bottom of the pan well. This is nice if you're going to be sliding up underneath a piece of meat to catch some fat and cut it off of there. So they both have their advantages. It isn't that one's better than the other. Now on your sharpening, what you're going to want to do is to work on your angle. You need to learn to hold a constant angle on your knife. And I'm not going to get into 30 degree or 20 degree or all of that, okay, because it's just sort of irrelevant. What you're looking for is to match the original bevel, and if you've got that on there, it's easy to look at it and kind of put it on the stone and look underneath the stone. You know, you can turn it up and get some light on it and see it from an angle. You'll understand that edge bevel. Now, as far as technique, as far as moving it across the stone, should you do it this way? Should you do it this way? Should you push like this? Should you leave it on there and push-pull like this? Do you do this kind of thing? All of these techniques will work, okay, every single one of them. The one I like to use, the one I used to use, is a simple pushing technique like this. I will work both sides, one side at a time. That will do a wonderful edge, and it leaves it very beautiful. However, this technique takes a little more time. Okay, it's slower. A little faster technique is using circular motion like this. Work it down and then back. Down, back. Now if you'll notice, my hand is locked at all times. It's moving in circles, but this back here stays at the same distance from the stone. In other words, this edge stays the same distance away from that stone while I'm turning this, so that I maintain a constant angle. Once you get used to holding a knife and doing this, just locking your wrist, it's easy to maintain that angle. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm moving my upper arm. My wrist is maintaining a steady, locked position, and that is to get a good edge cut. So give this a try. Now, as far as what do you use to lubricate stones? You can go with mineral oil or water. These stones work great with water. I used to use mineral oil when I used a natural stone, but I don't use this product anymore. I like to just go with plain water on this, and the neat thing about that, when I'm finished with my knife sharpening, I can simply take this out of its base. They are designed to pop out. I can put it in the sink and wash it up with the same sponge or scrub pad that I would use on my pots and pans. It'll clean it right up, and it's ready to keep going. You can cut dry or wet on this. If you're doing a lot of knives, I recommend leaving it wet, and that way the metal particles break loose from in between the diamonds, and they do cut better that way. So remember that constant angle. Now, if you have a blade like this, where you have that polished edge that was cut very, very thin, you also have a very long tapered edge. So you need to keep the back of the knife low. If you raise it up too much this way, you're going to have a very blunt, short edge that just isn't going to work well for you. A longer edge will slice smoothly and evenly through foods, although they dull quickly. So the advantage is knowing how to use the stone well, so that you can take your knife about once a week and spend a couple of minutes. And actually, if you keep them and you do it once a week, it's more like a couple of seconds. And you'll have your knife sharpened back to the way they need to be. See, I'm done with this one. It's already sharp again. Remember that push-pull? Like this. Alright. Remember to turn it over. Do the other side also. Next question is, how do you know if you have your blade sharp enough? Now, I use what's referred to as the drag test, and I think it's really the best method of finding out. Some people will take a sheet of paper and hold it up, and if it slices through it easily, okay, they consider that sharp enough. And that is quite wickedly sharp. The drag test works just like a razor blade. Now, most people have used razors, you know, and when you drag it across the skin, you feel a roughness or a pulling or dragging against the skin. Where if it's not sharp, you don't feel that drag. And a good way to learn this is to feel the back of the blade first. And it has sharp edges, but they're not sharp to the point that they would cut you. And they feel smooth when you do this. However, if I take my fingers and very gently pull backward across the edge of this way, you hear the dragging? Okay, that's just checking it the same way that a razor blade would slide across your skin. The more drag, the sharper it is. That's how you can check your knife to see just if it's sharp enough. Okay, so you got a couple of methods there. One to cut paper, one to check on the drag method. Okay, now I have finished my sharpening, and as you notice, my stone now is just embedded with some metal. Also, as I mentioned, sometimes those edges will show just a little bit better. You can see the bevel that I've just cut with my stone. It is that shiny spot at the tip of the knife there where the edge is. So when you're cutting that bevel, remember, keep a constant on that lock on your wrist so you can keep your bevel constant. Okay? Now, a couple of other things I wanted to mention about knives before we finish this up is in the construction of the knife, you're also looking for certain features. You want on a blade like this, and this is a blade that is made from a stamped steel that is not a forged blade, okay? So these have some very good qualities. They can be very thin steel. They can also sharpen a lot. And this one's been hollow ground, which allows me to put just a wickedly sharp edge on that. Makes this wonderful for filleting small fish. Also, I want to look for a tang, and that is the part that extends off of the blade that would run up into the handle. And it's nice to see the tang come all the way back. Doesn't have to, but that's a nice thing. Some knives have the tang hidden. You want to make sure that the manufacturer provides a internal tang in construction, and they'll usually show you a picture of the knife broken down that defines how the tang runs up inside of it. This is a forged knife, and they'll usually have this type of a closed bolster right back here that is right at the base of the handle, and then the tang fits up inside of the handle and it's hidden. That is common. Okay, now some knives, and this is a rare thing, but some knives are actually handed. They can be right hand or left hand. This is a right hand knife, or offset handle, you might say. The handle itself, if you will notice, is offset to the right. Now what that allows is for you to lay the knife a little closer to the cutting board, allowing this to be a little closer to flat, okay? Where this side, it stands up a little bit more. But when I do this, the back of the knife is low and allows me to make very thin slices along the board, okay? So having an offset grip is good for that. Also, the grip is shaped on some knives. Sometimes they're knurled for your fingers, like this. Sometimes they just have a unique shape so that the bend in your hand will fit onto the shape of the handle. The material of the handle is also kind of unique to certain knives. Some are wood. This is a wood handle. It's done in ebony. This is a composite plastic handle, okay? These handles hold up really well. They're very strong, and there isn't necessarily one better than the other, but I'll say this, the wood has a tendency to dry out, so you're going to want to use some mineral oil on it occasionally to treat it so that it doesn't crack, okay? So there you have it. That's Knife Basics 101, Knife Sharpening Basics 101, and it should give you a good start. Give it a try. Thank you for watching Texas Cooking, and please check out our other videos.